Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maya Shwayder. Earlier this month, WCA-TV and the Watertown News were scheduled to host a Democratic primary debate between the two candidates for Middlesex and Suffolk State Senate District. Unfortunately, that debate had to be canceled, and we were unable to find a new date and time that worked for everyone involved before the September 1st primary. So, in lieu of that debate, we are happy that we can still host two interviews and still give voters an opportunity to hear directly from both the candidates. I'll be asking each candidate the questions we had prepared for the debate, and to keep things fair, I'm asking each candidate the same number of questions on the same topics. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening and 1 minute for a closing statement. Both interviews will be made available online at the same time and will air on WCA-TV's public channel on a rotating schedule. Each candidate will be given equal opportunity to air first. So joining me for this interview is State Senate candidate Daniel Lander. Mr. Lander, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Please give us your opening statement.
My name is Daniel Lander. I grew up down the road in Cambridge, and I spent my career fighting for progressive change. I've worked alongside leaders like Senator Elizabeth Warren, Mayor Michelle Wu to tackle our housing crisis, drive down our racial wealth gap, invest in small businesses. I'm running for state senate this year because we're facing an affordability crisis that's made it impossible for working people to build a life. The cost of housing, healthcare, and childcare have skyrocketed over the past decade, and we've seen terrible attacks from Donald Trump on our communities, on immigrants, on our universities, and on life science research. Despite this, we have the least effective legislature in the country, and my opponent is the architect of that broken status quo that sees good ideas go to die on Beacon Hill every single year without a vote. I'm running because I believe in this moment we need leaders who will meet this moment with urgency, to tackle our housing crisis, to stand up to Trump, and to make sure everyone can build a good life in our state.
Mr. Lander, as you mentioned, you grew up in Cambridge.
Yes.
You currently live in Fenway. As you've been campaigning in Watertown, what have you learned about Watertown? What do you think matters to the residents here?
Yeah, so I grew up just down the road in Huron Village, and I spent a lot of time as a kid in Watertown playing soccer, visiting friends, and have many who still live here. I think the issues that I hear every single day as we talk to voters across this city are ones that resonate across it, which is that people love this community, but it has gotten incredibly, incredibly hard. I was talking to a 90-year-old woman just down the road from here on Mount Auburn who has lived in her home for over 50 years. And because she's on Social Security, as healthcare costs go up, as property taxes go up, she is increasingly feeling like she will be forced out of the community she has called her home for years. When I talk to young people who grew up in this community, who are living with their parents and can't imagine living on their own because of the cost of housing, I know we need more urgent action on that. I also, there are so many folks in this community that have been organizing to protect the incredible diversity of the city, organizing in the Rapid Response Network to make sure that immigrants are safe. We have unfortunately seen ICE kidnap people, even with green cards, off the streets of Watertown. So I think people here are hungry for more action to build affordable housing. They want an MBTA that's a reliable way to get around in a city that is no longer served by rapid transit. And they want a state government that is trying to protect their neighbors.
I want to come back to what you mentioned about ICE and about the MBTA. But first, I want to touch on something that I think is a big question that's been hanging over your campaign.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you've worked with Mayor Wu, you worked with Elizabeth Warren, you worked with Stacey Abrams on her gubernatorial campaign. This is the first time you've run as a candidate yourself. If you were elected, you would be one freshman candidate among 40. Now, you do have the support of Mayor Wu in Boston. How would we in Watertown know that you would have our interest at heart, that you would bring our voice to the table even when Boston and Watertown's interests are maybe pulling apart?
Yeah, I actually think the interests are really similar. There are so many people in all communities in this district who are just struggling under this affordability crisis and need leadership in the state senate that wants to put in place solutions. Things like a transfer fee to help us build more affordable housing. I'm really excited about how we can transform our public housing authorities to become public developers with architects, project managers, access to flexible capital, building housing at scale. That's a dream that I know many people here in Watertown share, who either work at the Public Housing Authority or who don't. Same in Cambridge and Belmont and Boston. And, I have spent so much of the last 9 months getting to talk to people across the district, showing up at standouts, in the cold, in the freezing cold, in the snow at Watertown Square, knocking on doors, going to Porch Fest, and built so many relationships. And those folks are people who every single day are trying to make this community better, trying to build more housing, trying to protect their immigrant neighbors, trying to bring more transit or clean up our streets. Those are people who I know are going to come with me to Beacon Hill because they are excited about a state senator who wants to partner with them, who wants to say, what can we do to protect our neighbors, to build more housing, to clean up our environment in the Charles River. And so I'm excited to work alongside them to fight for Watertown and make this continue to be a wonderful place to build a life.
So if Mayor Wu is talking to you about an issue that's on the table and you see something in Watertown that you think, maybe that's not going to work out so well for them, you would be willing to take that under consideration?
Of course. Like, I think of course I will go back for Watertown, but there are also so many places where, right, the 57 bus, for example, starts in Watertown Square, goes through Alston Brighton, right? It's not the most reliable way to get around. A lot of people have had an experience where it's gotten stuck in traffic, where it's going. Improving MBTA service is going to lift everyone's boats. I think those are the kind of things I'm going to be really focused on. How can we make sure the T is a reliable way to get around? How do we have more affordable housing? So whether you want to live in Watertown, whether you want to live in Cambridge, in Boston, you actually can put down roots. You can buy a home. You can, continue to live here.
Speaking of the T,
yeah.
Since you mentioned the lack of rapid transit here, would you push for a rail service to come to Watertown?
Yes, I would love to return rail service here. I want to start at the more practical level, which is running the bus service 24 hours a day. There are lots of people here in this city and across this district who work in our hospitals overnight. They work in bars and restaurants. And just people who want to enjoy our city, want to go see a concert or something, who have no choice overnight to get home aside from paying a lot to park or, spending like $100 or more on an Uber ride. The T has enough buses and enough bus drivers to run bus service 24 hours a day. It's actually why the workers who run those buses in the Green Line, they've endorsed my campaign because they believe in my vision for investing in public transit. And long term, I do think we should be expanding public transportation in a serious way. A dream, not going to happen tomorrow, that I would love to do is bring the Blue Line out here. Bring it out through Alston Brighton, out to Watertown. That would be an amazing way that would unlock jobs. Other cities around the country and around the world are making bold plans for how they expand public transportation. Not just keep the lights on. I think Boston should be following that example.
How do you get a legislature that's been slow walking this for a decade to suddenly move on this, especially as we said, as you would be a new face in the chamber? Yeah.
So one is I will be replacing one of the most powerful people up there who has used that position to block idea after idea after idea, right? And so when I get there, having sent a message that people in Watertown and in Belmont and in Cambridge and Alston Brighton and Fenway, that they are hungry for a legislature that doesn't just tell us why things are complicated or why they're hard, but actually wants us to get to work on problems, I'm going to go to my colleagues and say, okay, let's get to work. So you don't have primary challenges. So let's get this done. I also think there's a bunch of coalitions outside of the state Senate who want to work on these things. Our business community, our hospitals, labor unions, other people who their employees or their coworkers can't get to work, right? They do want us to. We have some of the worst traffic in the country, right? They want us to work on this, right? They want us to figure out how we are providing a real reliable alternative. And that's the kind of coalition that I want to build, not just in the state Senate, but with leaders from communities across the state.
We have a question that we got from the Charles River Chamber about the MBTA. They wrote in and said, for more than a decade, the T has had to ask the legislature for money to cover its budget each session. So how do you fully fund the T? Yeah,
so it's a good question, and we definitely need to do this. One place we should start is taking the big dig debt that is on the MBTA's books, right, which was for highway construction, off of it. They should not be paying for that, right? The State Department of Transportation for it. That's one good way. I also think we should think about ways to invest new dollars into the MBTA. So what other cities around the country have done is to say, we're going to do a planning process. We're going to say, how would we expand public transportation in a meaningful way? And we'll go out to communities and we say, if you will accept, 2-cent sales tax on top of that, we'll pay for it. And community after community has said, I'm willing to make that investment. And I think people here in Watertown are willing to make investments in our public goods. So they have great public transportation because unfortunately, right now it's not amazing. And so those are the kind of things I'm going to work on.
Have you heard from people in Watertown that they're willing to put forward that kind?
Yeah. So I was talking the other day down all right by by Gore Place to someone who says he was describing his commute to get into the city, and he has to take multiple buses to get there. And he dreams of a Watertown where he actually could have a reliable 1 or 2 seat ride downtown. I've talked to a lot of people who would be paying, I'm not saying pay a lot, right? A couple cents, right? To make sure we have a reliable way to get around. And I believe if you deliver people high quality public good, if you give them great public transportation that actually comes when it's supposed to, that comes frequently, people are willing to say, I want to make that investment. It's why here in the state, we've been willing to make wealthy people pay a little bit more to invest in better public transportation, to invest in high quality public schools and higher education. And I want to build on that work.
Staying with the T for a minute, but in a slightly different tact on the T. Watertown has zoned for almost double of what the state what the state required for the MBTA Communities Act. Housing advocates are saying that we actually need even more than what Watertown is zoned for. Do you support zoning for more right now, or would you rather wait and see how what we have works out?
I think it just went in place, so I think we should definitely let it start playing out for a little bit. I have heard from a lot of people who want more affordable housing to be built here, and that's in particular why I'm excited about transforming our public housing authorities to help deliver that, to use public lands. In Boston, I led a municipal land audit looking for city-owned land we could turn into affordable housing. We turned a couple parking lots into new public libraries and hundreds of units above them. We turned infill lots into new two-family or triple-decker affordable homeownership units. I think that's the kind of model that can work here. I also think that the state should be rewarding communities like Watertown that went above and beyond the MBTA Communities Act with things like better transit and more investments into public schools and into roads and other things like that, to say, yes, you actually have been a leader here, and we're going to reward you by making sure that the infrastructure is going to keep up with it.
We have a question from Housing for All Watertown.
Yeah.
They have asked, they say, the Massachusetts Senate Ways and Means Committee has recently proposed legalizing duplexes by right, which could unlock construction for thousands of new homes all over the state.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about the solutions to housing shortages in Massachusetts, how do you weigh the need for state action against this very strong history of local control?
I think, one, there are a bunch of things the state has been dragging their feet on that actually don't even go against that. So I'll give you a couple examples. Our high-rise building code in Massachusetts is at 70 feet. Everywhere else in the country, it's at 75 feet. That means, and above that, you have to build with steel beams. It gets really, really expensive. That means a whole floor of housing that could get built here in Watertown or other communities can't get built. And it drives up the cost of housing everywhere else. That's a pretty simple solution that the state has been unwilling to move forward in the legislature. Another one is single-stair construction that, can be done safely, can unlock on smaller lots, frankly, better units with more windows, more outdoor spaces. The best the legislature can muster on this is a bill to create a commission to study the idea of thinking about it. We should just work on that. That can help us build more housing cheaper and faster. And, I think we should be thinking about how we are supporting communities that are in the MBTA to build more housing. We are rewarding them, with better transit and with investments into public schools and into sewer and other infrastructure to make sure that they're rewarded for that. But we do need to build more housing because people are struggling.
Putting up high-rises in Watertown is controversial. Putting up parking garages in Watertown is extremely controversial right now. I have questions from the Watertown Business Coalition and the Charles River Food Co-op that are similar, but I'll ask them each separately. What would you do as a state senator to help communities you represent solve the problem of affordable spaces for businesses?
Yeah, I love this question, and it is a huge challenge facing small businesses. I worked very closely with many small businesses in my role for the city of Boston. I created a program called the Space Grant Program that helped more than 90 new storefront businesses open in vacant storefronts across Boston. I know the challenges they face both with the permit process and just finding affordable space. We need to be figuring out, one, new ways to provide loans and funding so that folks can get into those buildings. There are lots of landlords, honestly, I have talked to who own buildings who would like to rent to small businesses, but their lender, the bank, won't let them do it. So we're going to have to figure out ways to push the banks to let small businesses come in. And, I want to build on a pilot program we worked on in Boston, which helps support small businesses trying to buy their building so that they can own it stably and continue to do it. I also am excited about, and I've actually talked to folks in Watertown who lead this work, there are a lot of people who have built businesses over the last 50 years who are retiring right now, They're ready to sort of move on, do the next phase in their life, and they're sort of faced with a choice. Do I close my business down? Do I sell it to some private equity company? And I think the state has a real opportunity to incentivize them to, one, either sell it to their employees or sell it to other locals who can keep those businesses alive, keep them going for the next 50 years. And those are places I'm going to be really excited to roll up my sleeves and work alongside entrepreneurs and small business owners to make sure we continue to have a vibrant small business ecosystem here in Watertown and across this district.
On a similar note, so the Charles River Food Co-op is a not-for-profit. It is owned by the community, and the single biggest barrier that it's facing right now is the cost of commercial real estate.
Yeah.
They can't have a physical grocery store until it can afford this. So if elected, how would you work on the state level to help co-ops, for example, the Charles Food Co, but also others and other independent small businesses, be able to secure retail in this kind of space? Because again, like when you have a co-op that operates on a different system than your average sort of capitalist business.
Yeah. So, and actually in Boston, I've helped a couple co-ops open, at Dorchester Food Co-op and some others. One way to do it is as we are building new public infrastructure, whether we're building new housing or new libraries with housing, right? You can put in affordable commercial space, right? If we're going to leverage public land, then we could say, well, this community doesn't have enough access to a grocery store or healthy produce. And so maybe that's the kind of choice for a tenant we want to bring in at a below market rate. It could also be, right, childcare or other sort of civic needs. But, you know, I have worked on a bunch of projects where we've tried to use sort of the affordable commercial space at the bottom of a new affordable housing building to do that. I think that's a model to continue to build on. I also think we got to figure out new ways to lend to this kind of, you know, nonprofit business that have a civic mission, are trying to sort of solve a real problem, and have trouble accessing either, you know, commercial loans, have trouble accessing affordable rent spaces, and so there are things I want to build on.
I want to turn to the question of immigration, since you mentioned the controversies around ICE earlier. You've called for barring ICE from schools, courthouses, hospitals. The legislature has actually delivered on these protections. The PROTECT Act was passed, and it was just signed by Governor Healy on August 5th, I believe. And Senator Brownsberger sat on the committee that wrote and advanced it. He filed the related legislation himself. What is left undone here that you think?
So one, I'm glad they finally did it, but emphasis on they did it this month, right? Donald Trump has been in office for over a year and a half, and other blue states passed very similar laws months, if not a year ago. And advocates in this city and across the district were screaming for months, asking for action. And Senator Brownsberger and his colleagues dragged their feet. And through that period, right, people were kidnapped off the streets here. So I actually think they were not going fast enough. I also, you know, and this is a big point of disagreement between me and my opponent, is Massachusetts continues to have a cooperation agreement with ICE. We are the only blue state that still has one. I don't think we can trust that agency. I think we have seen, as they have murdered American citizens and green card holders across the country in the streets, that they are lawless, and we should not be cooperating with them. I think we should get rid of that agreement. I also, as I talk to educators, as I talk to healthcare workers who had lobbied the Senate on the PROTECT Act, right, there were a lot of good recommendations that were ignored. So I want to go back to those and bring them forward to make sure that immigrant students and families feel secure as they walk through the school building, make sure that immigrant patients and, frankly, immigrant healthcare workers feel secure as they go and treat folks or access healthcare. And so we should be continuing to build on it. And I think what people are asking for us in this moment is for our government to be working urgently to look for every solution to keep people safe, right? Don't have to have all the solutions to stop ICE, but how can we be looking for new ideas that can keep people safe, can keep our communities vibrant places? And that's what I'm going to do.
Let's talk about local aid. So cities and towns, and as you've mentioned, people are facing rising costs for everything: schools, public safety, infrastructure. And a lot of local officials are saying the state aid hasn't kept pace with the demands. So what specific changes would you be supporting to strengthen that? How would those changes be benefiting us?
Yeah, so unfortunately, since 2002, state aid to cities and towns has fallen by 25%. And that has meant, as inflation has wildly outstripped costs, right, cities across this Commonwealth, including Watertown, are forced to make really hard choices. And Watertown has done a better job of attracting new business to Arsenal Yards and elsewhere, but it is still a problem here. There's a couple different ways I want to approach this. One is we should start to figure out how in the state budget we are just increasing year after year state aid in a meaningful way so that communities can tackle these. We also should look at what are some of the big cost drivers and how we attack those. So one of the biggest challenges for cities and towns, right, paying their employees well, is healthcare costs, right? Healthcare costs have just gone through the roof. That's not something Watertown can solve on its own. It's not something Belmont can solve on its own. It is something that the state legislature could solve. And there are good ideas out there around the country that other states are putting in place, right? Arkansas, for example, has banned pharmacy benefit managers to make sure they're bringing down prescription drug prices, and it's working. We should be grabbing those ideas, putting them in place here, that can actually relieve pressure off our cities and towns and off of residents who are also paying sky-high rates for prescription drugs, are struggling to access primary care physicians. So those are some of the things I'm going to focus on.
Let's look at climate change for a minute. So Massachusetts has set some pretty lofty climate goals. Cutting greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030, which is in 4 years, and trying to reach net zero by 2050, which is closer than any of us would like to admit. What steps would you take to ensure that the state can reach these climate goals within the time frame?
Yeah, so one of the biggest sources of climate emissions in the state is our transportation sector, right? That means we're going to have to really invest in expanding the MBTA so it is a reliable way for people to get around. So you can actually make a choice of whether you want to sit in traffic on the Pike if you have to drive downtown, or you can hop on a train or a bus that's going to get you there faster. That means we're going to have to electrify our system, right? The commuter rail system, that comes around Watertown. It's not in the city itself, but there are a few stops near the border. That should be, and it would be in any other city, it would be an electrified system with trains that come 15 minutes or better throughout the day. That wouldn't be diesel trains, that would give you an option of getting downtown really fast, or even getting out to Worcester or go and get jobs all over the state. That's one place we got to focus. I also think we should be looking, as emerging technology continues to sort of come out of our state, frankly, and sometimes out of Watertown, that can bring down our emissions and deliver clean energy. Things like there's a green cement company that brings down emissions as they pour cost-effective cement. There's places like Commonwealth Fusion that could bring sort of limitless energy. We got to be investing in those technologies, bringing them onto the grid, and making sure we're taking advantage of them to bring down costs and move forward our energy transition.
As we've said, though, setting up all this infrastructure does not happen overnight, does not cost $0. Let's look at education for a second. So school districts in Belmont, Watertown, Cambridge, and in Boston, several of them have opened some brand new schools in recent years, which is great. A new building does do a lot. But how do you ensure that the state budget is still including funding for quality education and not just new buildings?
Though I would say, there's a lot of need. Watertown has been amazing at finding the resources to build new schools. I know I actually have knocked on a door and a mom and an 11-year-old came out and he said his number one issue was building a new middle school. So there's still more work to be done here, I know. But in Belmont and in Boston, there are lots of school buildings that were frankly built before World War II, right? Where teachers and students are teaching in classrooms that are regular 95 degrees. So we still have to do more there. And we need to be making sure we're resourcing high quality public education. A place that I'm really focused on is making sure that we're delivering enough funding for special education. There are so many kids here in Watertown who are not getting the support they need, and across the district, right? There's a $2 million budget gap in the school budget here in Watertown because of the way the state funds special education. And there have been a decade of reports from our state inspector general saying this system is broken, we need to fix it. And again, what the legislature has done is to let those sit on the shelf. We got to fix that. We got to make sure that kids with learning disabilities, with autism, with other things can get high quality education in school, or if they need a placement out, they can actually get it and they don't have to fight for it. And unfortunately, right, too many families here in Watertown I've talked to have had to fight for that. This issue is really close to my heart. My husband is a developmental pediatrician. He hears every single day from parents and from educators who are trying to navigate the system to make sure kids get the support they need. And so it's going to be a top priority for me to make sure that we are delivering more state funding to invest in high quality special education, and so every kid gets the support they need.
Have you kept track at all of the controversy around special education that's been happening in Watertown?
I have.
Yeah.
I've talked to a ton of parents about it, and who are just sort of so frustrated because they're just trying to advocate for their children, make sure they get the support they need. And honestly, so I have dyslexia. When I was a kid, when I was in elementary school, I struggled to learn to read. And because my mom advocated, I got some extra help. I learned, and it unlocked my world for me. And so I know how important this sort of intervention is. Families should not have to go begging and, frankly, having to sue the school department to get access to services. Our school system should be working, hand in hand with parents to make sure every kid has what they need to succeed.
I want to end by talking about your relationship to just Watertown politics and how the campaign's been going. So you picked up the endorsement from Mayor Wu, Massachusetts Teachers Union, I believe, as well. You picked up school committee members, some labor endorsements, and there are 3 sitting members of the Watertown City Council that actually defected from supporting Brownsberger and switched to you. What do you think changed there?
So I'm really proud that 3 of the 4 citywide at-large councilors here, Theo Fay, John Gannon, Tony Palumba, who at the beginning of this race, as you said, had endorsed my opponent, they watched this race. They listened to both of us. And they decided that they believe in my vision. And they believe in sort of our shared vision for a Watertown where everyone can afford a home, for a state where we are actually working with real urgency to tackle our problems, and we are not sort of defending a broken status quo on Beacon Hill, where we have the least effective and least transparent legislature in the country. And I think they support my record of showing up for working people, supporting people who are in tough contract fights, support investing in protecting our immigrants. I'm really proud of them. I'm also very proud that a son of Watertown, Steve Tolman, who used to represent this district for a long time, he's endorsed my campaign because he believes in my vision, and he knows I will be a champion for Watertown and Belmont and Alston, Brighton, Fenway, and Cambridge as well.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Closing statement.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm humbly asking for your vote. On September 1st, we have an opportunity to build a Massachusetts where everyone can afford a home in the communities they love, where immigrants are not afraid to walk down our streets, where families can continue to have children and love this place. That is the future I want to build alongside you. But we need leadership that will meet this moment with urgency and without excuses. And I pledge that when I'm elected as your state senator, every single day I will wake up with a fire lit under me to try and make your lives better, to work alongside you to build a better Massachusetts, and I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you so much, State Senate candidate Daniel Lander. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. And thank all of you for watching. As a reminder, this interview is one of two conducted by WCA-TV and the Watertown News with the candidates for the Middlesex and Suffolk State Senate District. Both candidate interviews will be available online and will air on WCA-TV's public channel on a rotating schedule, which will give viewers the opportunity to hear from both candidates before casting their ballots. The Massachusetts state primary is Tuesday, September 1st. Please go vote. For WCA-TV and the Watertown News, I'm Maya Shwayder. Thank you so much for watching.